Hello， 大家好，欢迎回到外媒看中国，我是安博然。Media and markets are responding strongly to the deal reached between China and the US in Switzerland over the weekend. Markets improved significantly, which will of course be welcome news to President Donald Trump, with Wall Street seeing a strong relief rally, the US dollar strengthening against major currencies, and markets here in Asia also rising. But what won't be good news for Trump is Western media reaction, with numerous outlets saying Donald Trump lost his game of chicken against China, and The Guardian calling it capitulation day. And it gets even more juicy. Are you guys ready to read some harsh media attacks that will be sure to keep Trump up all night? Let's do it. Today we'll go beyond the propaganda. This is Reports on China. I'm Andy Borham here in Shanghai. Let's get reporting. First up, the markets. Of course, markets around the world have surged following news yesterday that the US and Beijing are cooling off their tariff tensions and have agreed to reduce taxes on imported goods to 30% and 10% respectively. If you're unsure as to why the number isn't equal and why Chinese goods imported to the US face higher tariffs than the other way around, check out my last video which explains exactly that in detail. In the US, Wall Street saw a strong relief rally with the S&P 500 climbing approximately 2.6%, the Dow Jones Industrial Average up by about 2.5%, and the Nasdaq Composite surging over 3.3%. The US dollar strengthened against major currencies. Asian markets also rose, with Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index closing about 3% higher, Japan's Nikkei up significantly, and the Chinese mainland's key index is gaining over 1%. Now, that is all great news for Donald Trump, especially as he was facing extreme pressure domestically for his Liberation Day tariff war, that by most measures has been a total failure for the US, and specifically for his administration. Inflation was looming and a recession was looking imminent, with US shelves close to being empty after trade between China and the US literally ground to a halt. Not good news for Trump, on the other hand, is Western media reaction to the Switzerland agreement, who overwhelmingly cast Trump as a loser and China as cool, calm, and collected. Let's check some of those reports out. The Guardian ran with the headline, "Trump might claim China tariff victory, but this is capitulation day." And they wrote, "Donald Trump will inevitably claim Monday's temporary truce in the US-China trade war as a victory, but financial markets seem to have read it for what it is. A capitulation. In other words, the president has caved. It seems he's had his butt majorly spanked by China and now sees the need to be more respectful and stop acting like a schoolyard bully." It's been a tough lesson for President Trump, but one that will hopefully stick. The US is not the dominant world power it was in the 80s and 90s. The world today is a lot more multipolar, and Washington, D.C. needs to accept that reality and file into line, quick, sharp, or they'll just be signing off their own demise. Let's check out the next article. The Spectator's headline was sharp. "China has won the trade war with President Trump." They wrote, "China made very few concessions to get this deal. It has not opened up its markets to the American tech giants or agreed to ship fewer goods across the Pacific, or buy more planes or pharmaceuticals from the US, or indeed to scale back its attempts to move into higher value industries, such as autos, artificial intelligence, or aerospace. Instead, President Trump has looked at the potentially devastating impact that cutting the US off from Chinese imports would have on the economy and blinked. He was not ready to ride out the inevitable spike in inflation or the likely recession. For China, that is clearly a victory. The US needs China more than China needs the US. With that becoming increasingly clear, the US won't restart the trade war anytime soon, and China can resume its long-term plan of turning itself into the world's dominant economy." Ouch. And I think that is pretty right. This has been a complete victory for China, not only in gaining the respect and relative submission of Donald Trump, but also in showing the world that China is a stable, pragmatic, reliable alternative to US chaos. China plays fair and sticks to its word. That is more clear to see now than it ever has been, in my opinion. The Atlantic's headline and byline read, "China called Trump's bluff. There is a lesson here for anyone Trump threatens." The piece reads, The unveiling of the Trump global tariff regime was accompanied by a distinct form of dominance theatre. The president and his gang assured his targets that if they submitted to his tariffs, he would repay their compliance. Any country that dared defy him would suffer terribly. Most of the world accepted this advice, only to discover the difficulty of making global trade deals with a president who doesn't seem to understand how trade works. China, however, retaliated with countermeasures of its own, imposing steep tariffs on American imports. Trump held out for 1 month before backing down. I have to agree here too. China's defiance against Trump's Liberation Day tariffs, which were nothing more than a bullying tactic, really saved the world and gave Trump and his team a slap of reality. It's not 1998 anymore. China is bigger and stronger and more confident than ever, and it will not lie down and take Western threats and bullying lightly. This whole episode turned out not only a valuable lesson for Trump and his cohorts, but for anyone else who tries to use threats and intimidation to push China around. Right, next up, let's check out Bloomberg, whose headline read, "Xi defiance pays off as Trump meets most China trade demands." The article reads, Xi Jinping's decision to stand his ground against Donald Trump could hardly have gone any better for the Chinese leader. Xi struck a defiant tone ever since Trump began raising US tariffs to the highest level in a century. In contrast to other world leaders, he refused Trump's repeated calls to get on the phone with the US president, even as levies rose to levels that China called a joke. And that is exactly how you need to deal with Trump, right? Call him out for being a joke. Ignore him. That's the only way to get his respect. In fact, The Atlantic made that point quite well. They wrote, "Trump is a classic bully who craves submission and fears conflict. His fervent supporters want him to be Michael Corleone, but he's more like Biff Tannen." Do you guys remember Biff Tannen from Back to the Future? Standing up to Trump does not mean that you win, but giving in guarantees that you lose. Touché. And hopefully now, after China's defiance and demand for respect, Trump will be further whipped into line by world governments who will hopefully now have the confidence to demand respect. China's demands for tariff talks were met completely, with Trump removing all of his Liberation Day tariffs back to April 2. In the next 90 days, the two sides will work together through that point person that again was a Beijing demand that Trump met, by sorting out any remaining issues and hopefully come to some sort of long-term agreement. But as Trump has shown extremely clearly, long-term agreements with the US, and particularly with Donald Trump, don't mean much, and uncertainty remains in the world. Remember, ever since Trump's administration claimed countries were running to the White House to sign deals, only America's oldest ally, the United Kingdom, has managed to reach a consensus. The whole thing has been a total failure, but it's been fun to watch. And on that note, that will be it for today, you guys. But as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so do let me know down below. Also, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help the channel. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.